Hi, I'm Lina. Welcome to Lina's Storybook, where we share the most unforgettable audio novels. Let's get started.
I lay completely paralyzed on the cold hardwood floor, my vision blurring as my husband stepped over my injured head to go drinking with his best bro, a woman who openly mocked my final breaths. I spent 4 suffocating years trapped in an unconscious state, forced to listen to them being intimate right beside my hospital bed, until he finally cut off my oxygen to make room for their new baby. Then I blinked. The damp, earthy smell of moldy food filled my nose. I was back. The sudden rush of reality hit me like a physical blow. Just moments ago in my previous life, my husband's female bro Jess had sent over a batch of homemade artisanal wild mushroom and meat tarts. I had immediately noticed the unmistakable fuzzy mold spots festering in the filling and hurriedly tried to stop my husband Liam from eating them. My genuine concern had only provoked a fit of roaring, belly-aching laughter from his female bro Jess. She had mocked me ruthlessly, telling me that I was being far too sensitive over a few little tarts, and boasted that my husband had eaten everything under the sun, even vulgarly claiming he had flirted recklessly with her. I was so blinded by anger and disgust that I had grabbed the tarts and thrown them all into the trash. Liam, feeling that I had made him lose face in front of his friend, had shoved me violently. Caught entirely off guard, I had fallen backward, my head striking the floor with a loud crack that resulted in a massive head injury. Instead of helping me, Jess had simply stood there, looking down at me from her high horse, curling her lips in disdain. She had sneered that my fragility was exactly why she hated hanging out with women, complaining that we act like we are passing away from the lightest touch, and that it was completely boring. After delivering that cold verdict, she completely ignored my wide-eyed desperate pleas for help, grabbed Liam by the arm, and dragged him out to party all night at a local bar. Because I was left injured on the floor and missed the critical window for emergency resuscitation, I was left completely paralyzed and ultimately suffered a tragic loss. But now, I opened my eyes and found myself transported back to the exact day my husband received those moldy tarts. This time, as I stared at the fuzzy mold spots in the filling, I chose to turn a completely blind eye. "What are you just standing there spacing out for?" Jess's voice snapped me back to the present, her tone a relentless barrage of urging. "Your daddy here rarely does any manual labor in the kitchen. Shouldn't you be on your knees gratefully licking the plate clean?" Hearing her refer to herself as his daddy, Liam's ears suddenly turned a deep shade of red, and his facial expression grew visibly unnatural and awkward. I pretended to be completely oblivious to the exchange. I just sat there on the side, staring blankly, my mind still reeling as I hadn't fully recovered from the shock of my rebirth. "Evelyn, don't just sit there watching," Jess taunted, stepping closer. "Do you look down on my cooking skills or something?" Beneath the table I clenched my fists tightly together, lowering my eyes to conceal the overwhelming hatred burning in my gaze. Seeing the atmosphere in the room quickly becoming tense and awkward, Liam hastily spoke up to explain things to Jess. "Don't lower yourself to Evelyn's level," Liam said dismissively. "She has been pretty sick these past couple of days, and she picks fights with me over nothing. It is so annoying. I'm sick to death of it." Jess muttered a classic string of harsh words under her breath before suddenly leaning in right under my eyelids to pry into my face. "You guys didn't get into a fight because of me, did you?" she asked with feigned innocence. "We're pure bros, man. Why is she so petty and narrow-minded?" I'm honestly speechless. I couldn't take the suffocating air in that living room for another second. I stood up abruptly. I tossed the tart I was holding directly onto the coffee table, and hurried away to the bathroom. I turned on the faucet, and the freezing cold water rushed heavily over my trembling fingertips. I slowly lifted my head, making eye contact with my pale reflection in the mirror, and gently pinched my own cheek. It hurt. It hurt so much. This wasn't a dream. I really had been reborn. And this time, I swore to myself, I would absolutely not stand in the way of a single soul marching toward their own downfall. I cupped a handful of freezing water and splashed it forcefully onto my face, doing everything in my power to force myself to calm down. Just outside the bathroom door, I could hear Jess's flirtatious, teasing voice drifting down the hallway. "Tell me honestly," she coaxed. "Is your wife throwing a tantrum at you again? Talk to your bro." I'll teach you exactly how to put her in her place. Liam's voice was muffled and evasive as he explained the argument we had gotten into 2 days prior. I've explained it to her countless times. He complained bitterly. Changing my social media profile picture to a photo of you was just a punishment because I lost our drinking game. But she absolutely refuses to believe it. You really screwed me over with that one. In response, Jess just let out a loud, roaring laugh that echoed through the house. When I finally composed myself and pushed the bathroom door open to walk out, I was greeted by the sight of Jess lounging sideways, sitting directly in Liam's lap. The two of them were pressed tightly against one another, looking intimately close with absolutely no boundaries between them. Seeing me approach, Jess didn't even flinch or react. Liam, however, looked incredibly nervous. He forcefully pushed her off of him, and hurriedly grabbed a piece of clothing from the adjacent sofa cushion to drape awkwardly over his lap. He let out a dry, hollow laugh and asked me, "Wife, what was wrong with you just now?" I simply shook my head. I cast a brief glance over at the completely empty food container on the table, and asked in a tone that sounded entirely casual, "You ate all the tarts?" Liam rushed to explain, his tone bordering on pure flattery. "Yeah. It is rare for our tomboy Jess to actually step foot in a kitchen, so I absolutely had to give her face." Jess curled the corners of her mouth into a self-satisfied smirk and raised an eyebrow at me. Then she aggressively hooked her arm around Liam's neck. "Good bro, since you ate my food, you have to come out and drink with me tonight. We aren't coming home until we're thoroughly wasted." As she said this, she turned her head to look directly at me. "Sorry about this," she said with zero genuine apology in her voice. "We're organizing a bros-only gathering tonight, so we can't bring family members. Don't take it personally." I just let out a flat "oh," and then looked her dead in the eye. "So are you actually a man or a woman?" I asked. Jess immediately put on an expression of utter exasperation, acting as if I was the most unreasonable person on earth, and brazenly gestured right in front of me to prove her point. 3 incredibly tense seconds passed. She sneered at me with pure contempt. "Did you get a clear look this time?" she mocked. "I'm just a guy who was born into the wrong body. The guys never even look at me as a woman. If you have a problem with it, just say it straight to my face. Don't play this passive-aggressive, sarcastic nonsense with me." I nodded calmly in agreement. "That is true," I replied evenly. "If there was really something going on between you two, you would have gotten together a long time ago, and I wouldn't even be in the picture." The arrogant smile on Jess's face instantly froze. Liam opened his mouth preparing to say something to help his bro save face, but I beat him to the punch. "Since that is the case, then I don't have anything to worry about. You guys hurry up and go have fun. Drink a little less and come back early," I added, playing the perfect accommodating wife. Jess rolled her eyes at me so hard, I thought they might get stuck, grabbed Liam fiercely by his collar, and marched him toward the front door. I stood perfectly still in the living room, silently watching the retreating backs of the two of them as they left. The absolute second the heavy front door clicked shut, I bolted. I sprinted into the kitchen, grabbed a heavy kitchen tool from the block, threw open the refrigerator, and dragged out every single ingredient I could find, slicing and dicing them all endlessly on the counter. I kept preparing the vegetables and meats until I was completely physically exhausted, finally collapsing onto the cold kitchen floor. Only then did I feel my incredibly frayed nerves experience a fleeting moment of relaxation. Staring blankly up at the dull, gray ceiling, I bit down hard on my lower lip, letting several lines of silent tears streak down my face. In my previous life, at this exact same time, I had been lying on this exact floor just like this, my entire body completely numb. My consciousness had aggressively flickered in and out, drifting between moments of sharp clarity and dark oblivion, as I struggled with everything I had just to call out for help. But it wasn't until the late afternoon of the following day, when Liam finally sobered up and stumbled back home, that he finally called an ambulance and took me to the hospital for emergency resuscitation. It was far too late. The doctor delivered the crushing news. The volume of intracranial swelling is quite massive, and it has already severely affected the functional areas of the brain. it is highly likely to result in severe consciousness disorders. The family needs to be mentally prepared for the worst. Although my eyes were tightly shut, and I was entirely trapped in an unconscious state at the time, my internal consciousness was actually terrifyingly clear. I heard Liam suffer a complete emotional breakdown. Crying bitterly, I heard him throw himself to the side of my hospital bed, weeping his pathetic confessions. "I'm so sorry, wife. It is all my fault. I never should have treated you like that. Please just wake up, okay? As long as you wake up, I promise I will never make you angry again." However, as the agonizing duration of my unconscious state stretched on, the attending physician began to lay out the harsh reality to Liam. "Your wife may currently be entering a long-term comatose state, and the probability of her waking up has dropped significantly. If she doesn't regain consciousness after 1 month, the prognosis is usually very poor. You really need to prepare yourself mentally this time around." Liam seemed to accept this tragic truth with disturbing speed. That very same night, right next to my hospital bed, I heard Jess's unmistakable voice ring out. "You foolish man. Are you really planning on wasting your life away on her? Think about this clearly. If you act as her free caregiver, caring for her basic needs day and night, you won't be able to go out and fool around with me every day anymore." Liam gave a bitter, hollow laugh. "This is what we owe her. I'll just be the one to pay the debt." "What do you mean I owe her?" Jess flared up in anger. "If you ask me, lying there in a coma, she'd be much better off passing away early and finding release. If you're going to hold this against me, then I'll leave. I'll disappear from your sight right now." The sound of her furious stomping footsteps only lasted for a few paces before suddenly grinding to a halt. Immediately after, I heard someone forcefully pull the privacy curtain around my hospital bed. The harsh, scratching sound of the metal rings sliding on the track fell over the room, followed closely by the heavy intertwined sounds of their breathing, as they kissed right beside my motionless body. My heart felt like it was being violently sliced apart by a knife. During the 4 grueling years I spent trapped in an unconscious state, Liam and Jess frequently used the side of my hospital bed to engage in their disgusting intimacy. After enduring countless moments of excruciating heartbreak, my soul eventually just went numb. But when I heard them coldly discussing the logistics of abandoning my medical treatment, plotting how they were going to formally announce their marriage to their circle of bros, a deep, venomous hatred began to boil inside me. I wanted nothing more than to wake up every single second of the day, just so I could violently tear the hypocritical masks off of this vile pair, and make them pay a catastrophic price for what they had done to me. But the brutal reality was, I was trapped in a situation where I could neither beg for life nor plead for peace. It wasn't until Jess ended up getting unexpectedly pregnant that Liam finally hardened his heart enough to finish the job. In the dead of night, he quietly cut off my oxygen supply. As my strength slowly returned to me in the present, I pushed myself off the kitchen floor and walked over to sit down beside the living room sofa. I unlocked my smartphone and stared hard at the date displayed on the screen. 2021. A sudden, sharp memory pierced my mind. During the long agonizing period I had spent lying comatose in that hospital bed, I remembered listening to a news broadcast echoing from a neighboring patient's bedside radio. "Breaking news. Gold has hit another historic high, and the price of 1 gram of gold at jewelry stores has already broken the 1,000 mark." At the time, the people lingering in the hospital ward had struck up a lively discussion based on that exact topic. I distinctly recalled the smug, triumphant tone of one woman's voice. She had boasted to the room, "I bought my wedding gold sets back in 21. Back then, even including the craftsman fees, it was only 410 per gram. Now the price has completely doubled, and I am seriously thinking about selling my big gold bracelets." I lowered my head and stared fixedly at my phone screen. Right now, it was exactly 2021. Completely disregarding that treacherous pair who were currently partying at the bar, an immense wave of excitement for a hopeful, wealthy future washed over me. I immediately booked a train ticket, heading straight for Chicago, packed exactly 2 changes of clothes into my bag, and set off. Once I hit the city's famed Jewelers Row, I ruthlessly spent every single penny of my accumulated savings, not even leaving myself enough money to buy a return ticket. Just as I was standing lost on the bustling city street corner, my phone suddenly rang. It was Jess. "Hey, your husband is completely wasted. You need to hurry up and come back to take care of him," she demanded. "It is really weird, he didn't even drink that much last night, but he ended up feeling nauseous all over me. I'm way too lazy to make another trip back to my place, so I'm just going to take a shower at your house. Don't go overthinking things. I'm just borrowing one of your clothes. I certainly don't have my eye on your man's pathetic stamina." "Jess, if you dare talk that kind of nonsense again, believe it or not, I'll make you personally experience how fierce I can really be." Liam's slurred, aggressive voice suddenly chimed into the background of the call, but before he could spit out another word, the call was abruptly disconnected. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. It was really so hard to guess, wasn't it? Was he sick because he drank too much alcohol? Or was the nausea the direct result of severe reaction from those moldy tarts? Suddenly, I felt absolutely no rush to return home. I decided it was best to stay out of town for a while. Otherwise, I was genuinely afraid that if I went back and saw those two faces, I wouldn't be able to control myself and might actually make a terrible mistake. Tucking my phone away, I adjusted the straps of my heavy black backpack and started walking purposefully toward a cheap roadside motel. Chicago's industrial outskirts were filled with sprawling logistics warehouses, places that constantly demanded a heavy influx of temporary workers during the peak seasonal rush. I quickly secured a day labor position at one of the massive packing plants. The work was grueling, but it paid in cash at the end of each shift, giving me the untraceable autonomy I desperately needed. On my very first day, after finishing an exhausting 10-hour shift on the assembly line, I finally checked my phone. My screen immediately lit up with over a dozen unread text messages and missed calls from Liam. "Wife, why aren't you back yet? Where did you go? I miss you. Come back soon. Wife, my stomach is killing me. Where did you put that medicine you bought me last time?" Before I could even finish scrolling through the barrage of notifications, Liam called again. "Wife, when are you coming back?" He groaned into the receiver. "I feel so sick, I really need to throw up." His voice was incredibly weak and pathetic. I couldn't tell if it was because his body was actually failing him from the food reaction, or if it was just his guilty conscience acting up. I callously dropped him a location pin on the map, far from where I actually was. I was out and accidentally lost my purse with my phone and ID in it. I lied smoothly. "I'm stranded out of state right now and can't get back." Liam took a sharp, furious breath, instantly dropping the pitiful act to hurl insults at me. "Evelyn, are you foolish? How could you lose something so important? Did you lose your brain too? Running off so far away without saying a single word? Who are you trying to scare?" I casually rubbed my ear, wincing at the sheer volume of his shouting. When I hung up the phone, I immediately blocked his number without a second thought. I left him hanging for a full 24 hours. The next day, after collecting my daily wages, I treated myself to a hearty meal of prime steak at a local diner. Right as I was finishing my meal, I received another call, this time from an unknown number. "Wife, please stop throwing a tantrum, okay?" Liam begged, his voice dripping with forced patience. "I'm genuinely feeling awful. I'm begging you, please just come back." I leisurely chewed a piece of steak, swallowed it, and asked with feigned innocence, "Isn't Jess right there by your side to take care of you? You guys are the absolute best of bros after all. Are you just going to hold on to this grudge forever? I told you, she and I are just friends. You are my wife. I spent $20,000 on a diamond ring to marry you. Shouldn't you be the one taking care of me?" Liam completely lost his patience, his voice rising in anger. "I am giving you exactly 12 hours to appear in front of my face or else." He threw down his threat and aggressively hung up the phone. My heart didn't even skip a beat. I felt absolutely no emotional ripple whatsoever. I calmly finished my dinner, went back to my cheap motel room, and had a beautiful uninterrupted night of sleep. On the third day, I handed in my temporary badge, kept my head down, and finished my final shift. After collecting 3 days' worth of wages, I realized I had earned enough to buy another small fraction of a gold bar. But I suppressed the urge to invest. Instead, I bought a bus ticket back to my nightmare of a home. After several long hours sitting on a rigid bus seat, I finally arrived back at the house. When I pushed open the master bedroom door, I found Liam still lying heavily in bed. But as I stepped closer into the dimly lit room, the silhouette shifted. There was someone else in the bed with him, Jess. I quietly pulled out my smartphone and snapped a perfectly clear, high-definition photo of the two of them together in bed. Standing right there in the doorway, I uploaded it directly to my Instagram story and Facebook feed with the following caption: "During the 3 days I was away, I am so incredibly thankful that Jess never left my husband's side to take care of him. A million thanks." I left the post up and waited. For a long time, absolutely no one liked or commented on it. The silence from our mutual friend group was deafening, yet entirely predictable. Ignoring them, I carried the fresh groceries I had bought on the way home and turned into the kitchen. Just as I was tossing the second dish into the sizzling frying pan, Jess followed the noise and sauntered into the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe. "Wow, Liam was going crazy looking for you," she smirked, her arms crossed. "That whole runaway wife routine you pulled was pretty slick. Which trashy romance novel did you learn that from?" I stared intensely at the slices of beef sizzling and popping in the hot oil, flashing her a gentle, incredibly forgiving smile. "It is fine. Liam loves my cooking. Once he eats this meal, his anger will disappear." I turned my head to look at her, perfectly catching the deeply calculating, thoughtful expression that flashed across Jess's face. By the time I carried the steaming dishes to the dining table, Liam had finally dragged himself out of bed. He was hunched over, clutching his stomach in obvious discomfort. He shot me a venomous glare from across the room. "What did you even come back for?" I didn't argue. I just walked over to the medicine drawer, pulled out a heavy dose ibuprofen, and handed it to him with a glass of water. Shortly after taking the pill, the tight wrinkles on Liam's forehead gradually began to smooth out. "Only you know exactly how to fix me," he muttered, somewhat appeased. "I'll let it slide this time. But if you act this spoiled and reckless again, I won't forgive you so easily." I curled the corners of my lips upward, briefly raising my eyes to shoot Jess a subtle, triumphant glance. Then, I carefully picked up a piece of tender beef with my chopsticks and placed it directly into Liam's bowl. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice soft and dripping with fake remorse. "I was just so confused and angry the other day. Come on, try your absolute favorite cilantro, stir-fried beef." Now that Liam wasn't in excruciating pain, he naturally found his appetite returning. To Jess, however, watching us play the role of a happy, reconciled married couple was clearly offensive. She suddenly spat forcefully onto the floor several times, deliberately chewing up the piece of beef in her mouth and spitting the mangled meat directly onto the polished dining table. "Bro, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but you need to eat something decent," she scoffed loudly. "I could cook better than this with my feet." A flash of genuine embarrassment crossed Liam's face. He looked at me, shook his head apologetically, and covertly tapped his finger against his temple, silently implying that Jess was just acting crazy. I looked at him and smiled warmly. Jess, standing off to the side, took in our silent, unified exchange. It absolutely infuriated her. Her face flushed violently red, and she grabbed the edge of the dining table, attempting to violently flip it over in a dramatic fit of rage. Unfortunately for her, our dining table was made of solid, heavy mahogany. She strained and grunted, but the table barely shifted an inch. Humiliated, she stormed toward the front door, her face burning. "Fine. Fine. You all think there is something wrong with my brain, right? I'll leave. I'll completely disappear. Are you satisfied now?" Those words sounded incredibly familiar. I turned my head just in time to see my husband sprint across the room and desperately grab her hand to stop her from leaving. A sudden, phantom discomfort pierced my chest. I remembered now. This exact tactic, playing the tragic victim, aggressively retreating in order to advance, and twisting the blame onto others. was the exact foundational act that had solidified Jess and Liam's bond in my previous life. They constantly preached about their innocent brotherhood. Yet they engaged in the most ambiguously romantic behaviors imaginable, eventually culminating in them being intimate, right next to his comatose wife's hospital bed. It was pure, sickening irony. By the time I snapped out of my dark memories, Liam had already dragged Jess back into the dining room and forced her to sit down. After soaking in a barrage of his pleading and sweet-talking, she arrogantly lifted her chin in the air. "Your daddy isn't just blowing hot air," she bragged to Liam. "Your wife's cooking is seriously mediocre. For your birthday this weekend, Daddy is going to show off her skills and let you taste what real gourmet food is." Liam burst into loud, echoing laughter, and immediately agreed to the plan. Jess looked at me with a smug, triumphant smirk. "Since that is settled, we might as well just host the birthday party at my place. Evelyn, you make sure you come over early that day to be my kitchen assistant." I simply shook my head and politely declined the invitation. "It is better if you bros just celebrate together. If I go, it'll just make everyone feel awkward and restricted." Jess clicked her tongue aggressively, her tone instantly becoming hostile. "Ons, you're done cooking, you can just leave. You don't even value your own man's birthday. I have no idea what my bro ever saw in you." I lowered my eyelashes, hiding the chilling void in my eyes. Underneath the table, my thumb rapidly rubbed against the new, pure gold prayer beads I had secretly bought for myself, feeling the heavy metal through the fabric of my pocket. I thought about it for a long time, and finally decided to offer my full support for their deep brotherly bond. I figured I might as well let as many people as possible bear witness to their very special relationship. After Jess finally left, I compiled a massive list of Liam's favorite dishes and texted it directly to her. Jess quickly replied with a crude meme that read, "Women are so annoying." When the day of the birthday finally arrived, Liam spent over an hour meticulously grooming himself. He styled his hair heavily with gel, changed into a crisp, elegant white button-down shirt, and even sprayed breath freshener into his mouth. Right before walking out the door, he turned back to confirm with me one last time. "Are you really sure you aren't coming? They bought a massive 2-tier cake, and I know how much you love the frosting on top." I shook my head, declining him yet again. "It is a house full of men. I wouldn't have anything to talk about with your friends anyway." Liam smiled in relief and nodded. "That is true. I wonder what Jess prepared for my birthday gift this year. She claimed I'm going to absolutely love it. She is way too confident," he chuckled. "Anyway, I'm heading out. I'll take a video later so you can witness her culinary masterpiece." He turned around and walked out with a light, eager bounce in his step, disappearing into the dim apartment hallway. A little over 2 hours later, Liam sent me a video clip. In the video, the room was shaking with uproarious laughter. Jess was wearing a highly suggestive, sheer purple top. Her face was completely smeared with cake frosting, and she was laughing loudly into the camera. "You bunch of troublemakers. I spent 2 hours doing my makeup, and you ruined it before I could even take a selfie. Your punishment is that every single one of you has to clean this all off me." When it came to Jess's punishments, her loyal bros always executed them with terrifying dedication. I switched over to Instagram and constantly refreshed my feed. Sure enough, one of Liam's other bros had just posted a new story update. In the chaotic footage, Jess was leaning back against the sofa, shouting aggressively while crossing her arms tightly, deliberately showing off her appearance, because Liam was the star of the birthday banquet. The bros were teasing him mercilessly, leaving him flushed red, all the way down to his neck. At the end of the video clip, the layer of cake on Jess's face was worn dangerously thin. She glared at the group with faux anger. "Are you guys crazy? If you have the guts, why don't you compete with Liam to see who lasts the longest?" The bros around her shouted and hollered in absolute frenzy. "How do we compete? Are you gonna test us one by one?" "Bro Jess, you are way too unfair. How come you didn't give us a gift this huge for our birthdays?" "Brother Jess is mighty. Look at Liam, he is holding it in so hard he is practically smoking." "You guys better take it easy. Liam is a married man. If Evelyn finds out, She is definitely going to throw a fit. The group of good bros laughed and jeered, taking total advantage of the chaos to push and shove Jess under the guise of playful horseplay. I downloaded the video and saved it to my phone, watching it on a loop. Finally, I paused the video at exactly the 0:56-second mark. I used my fingers to zoom in heavily on the dishes laid out on the dining table in the background: a wildwood ear mushroom salad, cilantro stir, fried beef, roasted chicken drumsticks, braised pork ribs, and a massive bowl of pork rib noodle soup. Their presentation looked completely ordinary. I slowly curled my lips into a wide, chilling smile. I immediately pulled up Liam's contact and dialed his number. The food Jess made really does look incredible. I cooed into the phone. Make sure you eat a lot. Don't let your good bro's hard work go to waste. I waited for about 3 or 4 minutes before Liam finally answered the phone. Offering a few distracted grunts, the call lasted less than 2 seconds before he abruptly hung up on me. The next morning, the apartment was blissfully quiet. The heavy weight of Liam's presence was completely gone, leaving the space feeling entirely mine again. I was standing in the kitchen, casually blending a fresh fruit smoothie for breakfast, when my phone suddenly buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. Answering it, a sharp, anxious voice rushed through the speaker. "Hey, is this Evelyn? I'm Chloe, Peter's girlfriend," the woman asked quickly. "Is Peter still over at your place?" I paused the blender, letting the silence stretch for a brief moment before answering. "No, he isn't," I replied calmly. "They hosted the birthday party over at Jess's apartment last night. My Liam still hasn't come home yet either. That toxic friend Jess again." Chloe exploded through the phone, her voice laced with pure indignation. "Peter literally promised me yesterday that he was just going to your place for a normal dinner, but he ended up going to her place instead. He really is an idiot that can't stop making terrible choices." I thought about it for a second, then offered to add her on social media to share what I knew. Once she accepted my friend request, I immediately forwarded her the screen-recorded videos from last night's birthday party. The ones showing her boyfriend and the other guys practically drooling over a half-dressed frosting-covered Jess. Just a few minutes later, my phone pinged with a notification. Chloe had aggressively added me into a brand new group chat, and within seconds, 3 other women were added to the roster. They were the girlfriends and wives of Liam's other bros. Once the head count reached 6, Chloe forwarded the 2 compromising videos directly into the chat and tagged absolutely everyone. "Chloe, who has the time to come with me right now to catch them in the act?" The moment the text dropped, someone immediately replied with 3 massive question marks. But the shock quickly wore off, and 2 of the other women fiercely responded that they were in. Chloe dropped Jess's exact apartment address into the chat and told everyone to meet at the complex's front gates in exactly 1 hour. Such an incredibly spectacular event was about to unfold. Naturally, there was absolutely no way I was going to miss it. Exactly an hour later, I arrived at the luxury apartment complex and finally met Chloe in person. She had a sharp, no-nonsense look about her. A crisp black bob cut right at her ears, a simple tight black t-shirt, and a pair of fitted denim jeans. The moment she saw me approaching the gates, her eyes locked onto me. "Are you here for Jess?" she asked, her tone completely guarded. I nodded slowly. "I'm Evelyn. Liam is my husband." Hearing my introduction, the sharp vigilance in Chloe's eyes gradually melted away, instantly replaced by a sense of shared camaraderie. She practically threw her arm around me and started venting her disgust for Jess without holding anything back. "Remember when that whole 3 shots trend was going viral online? She posted a video tagging my boyfriend and all the other guys, crying about how these bros are closer to her than her actual family." Chloe sneered bitterly. She told this whole sob story about how, during their most desperate year, they all crammed into a single tiny studio apartment and slept on the floor for half a year just to survive. Now, a decade later, these bros are getting married or into serious relationships. But the second she says the word, every single one of them drops everything to run to her. Chloe let out a dark laugh. "I was so naive. I had this absolute toxic friend hovering around my relationship the whole time. And I didn't even notice until now. As she spoke, she turned to look at me with eyes full of genuine pity. The second I get upstairs, I'm breaking up with Peter. What about you, Evelyn? I forced a tight smile onto my lips. I haven't fully decided yet. I'll just wait and see how things look when we get up there. Chloe hesitated, opening her mouth several times as if she was preparing to give me some advice, but ultimately decided not to say more. I knew she probably wanted to tell me to divorce Liam immediately. But getting a divorce meant filing endless paperwork, fighting over assets, and waiting out a mandatory cooling-off period. It was far too troublesome. Besides, I was pretty sure there was a much better way to handle my particular problem. Once the other two women arrived at the gate, our group marched into the building and heavily pounded on Jess's front door. We knocked endlessly, but there was zero response from inside. Finally, Chloe remembered something Peter had told her, lifted the dusty welcome mat, and found a spare key hidden underneath. We unlocked the door and aggressively pushed our way inside. The second the door swung open, a putrid, suffocating stench of stale alcohol, smoke, and something sour assaulted our noses. The living room looked like a war zone. 3 or 4 men were sprawled haphazardly across the carpet and the sofa, lying in incredibly unnatural, twisted positions. Chloe marched straight over to her boyfriend, looking down at his body as if she were staring at a pile of repulsive trash. "Peter, are you out of your mind? Get up right now," she shouted, kicking his leg. The other two women walked over to their respective boyfriends, their faces pale with anger and shock. I quickly scanned the living room, but couldn't find Liam anywhere. Assuming he was in the bedroom, I took a step toward the closed master door. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the heavy silence. I whipped my head around to see one of the girls, the one wearing a bright yellow cardigan, stumbling backward in sheer terror, desperately throwing her arms around Chloe. Chloe looked at her in total confusion. "What is wrong with you?" The woman in the yellow cardigan couldn't stop trembling violently. She pointed a shaking finger at the bodies on the floor. They're gone." "What? Who was gone?" For a split second, my mind went completely and utterly blank. Total chaos erupted. 30 minutes later, heavily equipped paramedics had swarmed the apartment. Liam and Jess were strapped to stretchers and rushed to the hospital's emergency room for immediate treatment. The other 4 men on the floor, however, were pronounced deceased at the scene. Chloe, myself, and the other women were all taken to the local precinct to give our official statements. While I was sitting in the cold interrogation room, my cell phone rang. It was the hospital's billing department. "Are you Liam's family member?" the cold voice on the other end asked. "The patient's condition is extremely critical. You need to prepare $20,000 and come to the hospital immediately to pay the deposit. Otherwise, it will severely delay his life-saving treatment." I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears began streaming down my face, and I sobbed. Because the phone was on speaker, the entire room heard the staggering medical demand. Chloe let out a heavy, exhausted sigh and gently patted my shoulder. "Evelyn, don't try to carry this all on your own. Try to stay strong," she murmured comfortingly. With such a catastrophic event unfolding, I acted completely helpless, clinging tightly to Chloe, the only person showing me any sympathy. Chloe, seeing me entirely broken, finally asked, "How much money do you guys actually have in savings?" I pretended to think hard, sobbing even more. "I quit my job earlier this year to stay home and prepare for a family. My savings are basically completely gone. Liam's salary barely covers the mortgage and his expensive car loan. We live paycheck to paycheck." Chloe pursed her lips tightly. "Then you have to sell the car first." It was exactly what I wanted her to say. Acting as if she had just given me a brilliant lifeline, I immediately followed her advice and contacted a dealership to liquidate Liam's prized possession. Liam absolutely worshipped that car. He was just a middle management team leader at his company, but he had willingly taken on a massive auto loan, just so he could drive a luxury vehicle, to flex on his friends. The cash I got from the rushed sale was barely enough to cover the initial phase of his medical treatment. I took the cash straight to the hospital's billing department and cleared his negative balance, but the doctor pulled me aside with grim news. Your husband's condition is extremely unoptimistic. It would be best if you prepared even more backup funds immediately. I nodded, tears still brimming in my eyes. I instantly pulled out my phone, took pictures of Liam lying in his hospital bed covered in tubes, and took photos of his medical reports. I dumped them all into Liam's massive extended family group chat, meticulously tagging his parents and every single relative. I'm so sorry to bother everyone, but I have absolutely no other choice. Liam got severe food poisoning, eating out, and is currently fighting for his life in the ICU. I am begging all of you, please lend me some money. The moment Liam recovers, I promise we will pay you all back. The group chat instantly exploded, with relatives demanding to know the full story of what happened. Once I explained the situation, a few of the elders reluctantly transferred a small amount of money. His parents called me in a panic, stating that they were driving to the city immediately. After half a day of asking, his family had lent me a grand total of $240. I didn't keep a single cent of it. I loaded it straight onto Liam's hospital billing card. By the time my frantic in-laws and Liam's younger sister rushed into the hospital, Liam was locked away in the intensive care unit, and visitors were strictly prohibited. They couldn't even see his face. I had no choice but to bring them back to our apartment to sleep. That evening, just as my sister-in-law was casually asking me how much our apartment was worth on the current market, my phone rang again. The police had finalized the toxicology report. Liam and Jess were going to live, but the other 4 men had passed away. They had died from severe food contamination. The lethal toxin primarily originated from 2 dishes on Jess's dining table: the wildwood ear mushroom salad and the artisanal pasta, compounded by her unsanitary, moldy wooden utensils. She had soaked the wood ear mushrooms in water for far too long at room temperature, and she had kept the fresh pasta in her freezer for over a year. This gross negligence created a massive breeding ground for harmful bacterial toxins. The contamination was horrifyingly lethal. Just a tiny amount was enough to cause critical harm to a grown adult, let alone the massive dose she had served them. Peter and the other 3 men had eagerly consumed those 2 dishes, leading directly to their rapid, tragic end. Liam and Jess, however, barely touched the food, preferring to just drink instead. But because they used the severely contaminated wooden utensils and the mold-infested cutting board to prepare the meal, they ended up suffering from severe organic food contamination. Both of these toxins were incredibly dangerous because they were highly heat-resistant. Boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius and hot frying oil were completely useless in destroying them, so every single person who attended that birthday party was severely affected. The next morning, I learned that Jess's condition was the mildest, and she had already been transferred out of the ICU to a regular recovery ward. I helpfully provided her room number to my furious in-laws, then immediately turned around and went straight to meet with a real estate agent. By the time the hospital nurses called me for an update, I had already finalized the contract to sell our apartment. I arrived back at the hospital, casually deposited half of the house sale proceeds onto Liam's medical billing card to keep him alive, and then strolled at a completely relaxed pace toward Jess's hospital room. It is Liam's wife. She is here. You were the one who taught Jess how to cook those dishes. Our Jess has never cooked a meal in her entire life. You must have been jealous of how close she and Liam were, so you deliberately manipulated her into cooking that food. The moment I approached the door, Jess's family swarmed me. They surrounded me tightly, shouting in my face and interrogating me from all sides. I forced myself to stand my ground, refusing to take a single step backward, as I systematically dismantled their accusations. You make it sound so real. Did you see me do it with your own 2 eyes? I snapped. She is 26 years old, and you're still calling her ignorant. Is she completely incapable of basic thought? Your Jess caused the loss of 4 lives, and she forced me to sell my car and my house, just to pay for my husband's medical bills. Instead of thinking about how you're going to compensate us victims, you're out here trying to throw the blame onto someone else. Is it because you don't want to pay up? Right as the last word left my mouth, A massive crowd of people violently burst into the hospital hallway. I turned my head to look. Walking right at the front of the group, leading the charge, was Chloe. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she aggressively marched the furious crowd straight toward Jess's hospital bed. "Aunts and uncles," Chloe cried out, her voice breaking. "The person responsible for what happened to your sons is sitting right there. The departed can't be brought back. But you have to fight for justice. Please don't do anything reckless." Before she could even finish her sentence, an older woman pushed Chloe aside. "I've lived a long life, and this is the absolute first time I've ever seen someone's cooking cause the loss of 4 grown men. She must have intentionally contaminated the food." The grieving mother shouted. "Exactly. Otherwise, why is it that everyone else passed away, but her and her friend survived?" Another relative yelled. The furious crowd surrounding Jess's bed grew larger and more suffocating by the second, rapidly pushing Chloe back against the hospital wall. Through the dense sea of angry, shouting people, Chloe's eyes suddenly locked onto mine. And right then, the corners of her mouth slowly curled upward, into a dark, knowing smile. I felt a sudden pang of deep curiosity. I wasn't entirely sure if this catastrophic event was purely an act of fate, or if there had been another invisible hand pushing it all along. That night, while scrolling on my phone, I saw that the local news regarding Jess's birthday party had gone viral, with likes and shares easily surpassing 100,000. People in the comment sections mockingly dubbed Jess the dangerous chef. Originally, the media had used a pseudonym to protect her identity, but because Jess's family had offended every single victim's family at the hospital the day before, numerous people deliberately leaked the dangerous chef's real identity and the full backstory to the public. Overnight, Jess became infamous. There were even content creators parodying her toxic cooking to chase internet views. At the exact same time, Chloe sent a message into our newly formed group chat. "Is anyone willing to join me in pursuing absolute maximum criminal charges against Jess? If we can't get compensation out of her, we need to fight to ensure she is legally detained for as long as possible." Seeing the message, I decisively responded to the call to action. Chloe reached out to me directly to gather more evidence regarding Jess's behavior, and she led me and the other grieving families to the police station to communicate with the investigators. The overwhelming pressure we applied forced Jess's family to finally come out and attempt a mediation with us. As expected from a family that raised someone like Jess, they sat at the negotiation table, with the exact same arrogant expression she always wore. "We will give you $1,000 each. Take it, and you are never allowed to come cause trouble for us again." $1,000. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Since when did a human life become so cheap? Given the family's insulting attitude, there was absolutely no room for negotiation. Consequently, the very second Jess was discharged from the hospital, she was immediately taken away and detained by law enforcement. Her family's attempt to blame us had failed miserably, and they were far too greedy to pay the civil compensations required to help her. Seeing that helping Jess was a lost cause, her parents stood right in front of us victims' families and brazenly began discussing their plans to start over. We raised a girl like a boy, and she still ended up being completely unreliable. Now that they've lifted the child limits, we might as well try to have a new baby, her mother muttered callously. "Yeah, fine. At least now you get tax credits for having kids. Unlike Jess, that liability who just drains our wallets at every turn." Her father agreed. Her bros were all gone, and her blood relatives had completely abandoned her. Jess, who had spent her entire life acting as the untouchable center of attention, was suddenly cast into total isolation when the weather began to turn freezing cold. The staff at the detention center called Jess's family several times, but no one ever answered the phone. Shivering in her cell, Jess had no choice but to use her one phone call to dial my number. "Evelyn, I left 2 of my jackets at your apartment. You need to bring them to me immediately." I genuinely admired her confidence. But I wasn't her mother. Why on earth would I cater to her? "Sorry to disappoint you," I replied coldly. "Liam is still in the hospital fighting for his health, and I've already sold the apartment to pay his bills. Your clothes are probably gone by now." Jess panicked. Then just grab any 2 thick coats you have and bring them. I'm skinnier than you, so your clothes will definitely fit me. Hurry up. I was just about to reply to her when my in-laws suddenly rushed into the hallway to find me. Liam is finally out of the critical danger zone. Hurry, let me go to the hospital to see him. Jess heard the shouting through the phone and instantly grew ecstatic. I don't need you anymore. Liam will definitely come visit me and help me out. Oh, sure. Just keep waiting for him then. I hung up the phone, stood up, and followed my in-laws out the door. When we arrived at the hospital, I went straight to the kiosk to check the balance on Liam's medical card. Over $200,000 had been deposited. And in the blink of an eye, there was only $30,000 left. The attending doctor pulled us aside. Liam's physical condition is still extremely fragile, especially because the severe food contamination caused liver damage and a catastrophic drop in his immune system. There are many standard medications we cannot safely administer to him. Your family will need to put in a lot of extra care and effort. My in-laws nodded repeatedly, promising to do whatever it took. I stood off to the side, feeling a bit dazed. It took me a long moment to fully process the reality that I was standing there, perfectly healthy, able to run and jump, while the person confined to the hospital bed was Liam. Suddenly my mother-in-law struck my arm hard. It stung fiercely. I snapped back to reality and looked at her. What are you standing there spacing out for? Hurry up and go buy your husband some food, she barked. He has lost so much weight there is barely any flesh left on his face. And you don't even feel sorry for him. My $20,000 engagement ring was totally wasted on you. And you still haven't even managed to have a kid. I instinctively turned around to leave, but the doctor raised a hand to stop me. Given your husband's current state, he absolutely cannot consume anything high in protein, high in fat, high in salt, hard or rough in texture, alcoholic, high in sugar, or anything spicy and stimulating. Then, what was he supposed to eat? The doctor gave me a strict dietary guideline, and I successfully purchased the patient-exclusive meal from the hospital cafeteria. It was basically a bland, nutrient-dense paste. My mother-in-law snatched the container from my hands, took one look at it, and grimaced deeply. How is he supposed to eat this sludge? This is what happens when someone grows up without parents to teach her any manners. She insulted me. Your man is lying in bed, skinny as a skeleton, and you can't even bear to spend a few dollars to buy him a proper bowl of rich soup to nourish him. I remained completely silent, simply staring at Liam. It was only then that I realized how drastically he had transformed in just half a month. His head had been completely shaved. His cheekbones jutted out sharply from severe weight loss. A ring of aging stubble covered his chin, and the skin beneath his hospital gown hung loose and hollow. So this is how different people look when they fall this severely ill. Look at her. My words are just going in one ear and out the other. She sold the house and the car without even telling us. We didn't even know until the buyers came to inspect the property. If it wasn't for the fact that Liam is going to need her to serve him for the rest of his life, I would kick her out right now. After cursing me out, she immediately turned around and demanded I give her cash. I coldly transferred $200 to her phone. As soon as his parents left the room to go buy real food, I leaned down, bringing my lips right next to Liam's ear, and whispered softly, "Did you hear that? Your mom feels so bad that you lost weight. She went out to buy you something delicious. Sometimes, I'm really jealous of you. When you get sick, you have your mom and dad here to take care of you. Unlike me, growing up in a group home, without a single close friend in the world. You always used to mock me for having no one to care about me, and no one to love me. But I guess you and I are pretty much the same now. To pay for your medical bills, the house and the car were completely liquidated. You own absolutely nothing to your name anymore, except for a mountain of massive debt. Does it feel like your life is completely over?" Liam's breathing grew incredibly heavy and ragged. He definitely heard every single word I said. I calmly walked over to pour myself a cup of water to soothe my throat. Then continued, "Do you know what they call Jess now? She took out your entire friend group with a single meal. The internet calls her the dangerous chef now. Your 4 unlucky friends passed away that very same night. You have slightly better luck. Conservatively speaking, you might survive for another 3 to 5 years. Just as I finished speaking to Liam, my in-laws returned, carrying heavy plastic takeout bags. I tactfully stepped away from the bed to give them space. My eyes drifted over to the bags. I saw that they had bought heavy noodle soup, powdered soy milk, apples, bananas, and a whole crate of dairy milk. My mother-in-law told my father-in-law to eat his portion first. She was going to personally feed her son. I didn't make a single sound. I just walked to the foot of the bed and cranked the lever to elevate Liam's upper body. At least you have some basic common sense. My mother-in-law shot me an ungrateful glare. She opened the plastic takeout container, picked up a massive chunk of meat and noodles with her chopsticks, blew on it to cool it down, and forcibly shoved it directly into Liam's mouth. The private caregiver hired for the patient in the adjacent bed couldn't stand to watch it anymore. She kindly warned them, "Your son has a nasogastric feeding tube inserted in his nose. You have to use that device to feed him liquid nutrition." My mother-in-law hurriedly asked the caregiver how to use it. After getting a quick tutorial, she took the lukewarm broth and thick noodles and pureed it, then pumped the heavy meal directly into Liam's weakened stomach. Less than 20 minutes later, cold sweat poured profusely down Liam's forehead. His lips and fingernails rapidly turned a terrifying, dark purplish-black, resembling the color of a bruised eggplant. The ECG monitor beside him began shrieking with a frantic, heart-stopping alarm. My mother-in-law panicked completely, trembling violently as she sprinted to the door of the ward and shouted, "Doctor! Doctor! Come quick!" My father-in-law grabbed a tissue and tried frantically to wipe the purple color off Liam's fingernails. When he realized it wouldn't wipe away, a look of absolute horror washed over his face. I couldn't be of any help, so I just stood quietly off to the side. A swarm of doctors and nurses in white coats came sprinting into the room with a crash cart to begin emergency resuscitation. One of the senior, balding doctors turned and strictly interrogated my mother-in-law. "What exactly did you feed him? How much did he eat? Do not lie to me. Tell the exact truth." My mother-in-law's eyes were wide with terror, and she screamed back defensively, "It was just a bowl of clear soup. We ate the exact same thing, and we're perfectly fine." The senior doctor immediately ordered a nurse to take the leftover broth from my father-in-law's bowl straight to the lab for emergency testing. While we were waiting for the results, the doctor performing chest compressions suddenly stopped, looked up, and delivered the final verdict. "The patient's vital signs have completely vanished. I am sorry for your loss." My mother-in-law's eyes rolled into the back of her head, and she collapsed, face planting directly onto the hard hospital floor. My father-in-law didn't even bother to check on his unconscious wife. He gritted his teeth, lunged forward, and violently grabbed the senior doctor by his collar. "That is impossible. My son was perfectly fine just a minute ago." "I'll confront you quack doctors." The hospital ward instantly erupted into total chaos, turning into a madhouse. Thankfully, the senior doctor had anticipated the situation and called security in advance, and they swiftly tackled and restrained the enraged father-in-law. When the lab results finally came back, it delivered a devastating blow to the old couple. Because they were incredibly cheap, they had specifically sought out the most inexpensive, run-down diner they could find to buy the soup. You get what you pay for. The only reason the diner was so cheap was because the owner heavily laced their rotting meat with industrial chemical preservatives to keep it looking fresh and prevent it from spoiling. If a healthy, normal person ate a meal or two there, they might just experience some mild nausea or stomach discomfort. But my mother-in-law had aggressively pumped a massive concentrated bowl of it directly into Liam's deeply compromised system, effectively causing his ultimate demise on the spot. Ultimately, both my in-laws and the owner of the cheap diner were taken away by law enforcement for questioning. Left entirely alone, I handled Liam's final arrangements, keeping everything as simple and affordable as humanly possible. Once Liam's death certificate was officially filed, our legal marriage was automatically dissolved. When I packed my bags to leave the city for good, my in-laws were still far too immersed in their own grief and legal battles to even lift their heads and look at me. Chloe's car was waiting for me downstairs. When she dropped me off at the train station, she looked at me and smiled warmly. "You're finally free." After a long 3-hour train ride, I returned to the group home where I had grown up. The facility looked quiet, with only a handful of children running around who needed someone to care for them. When the director, a woman I lovingly called Mom, heard that I wanted to come back and work at the home, she looked at me in disbelief. "Why? Did you get a divorce?" I nodded softly. "We never had any children, and the feelings just faded away." "But that $20,000 engagement ring you fought to get for me?" "I left it with him," I lied gently. Leaving that city meant I never wanted to speak of those people ever again. So, to keep the people who truly loved me from worrying, I gave Liam a fabricated, dignified exit from my life. A flash of profound relief and pride crossed the director's eyes. She pulled me into a tight, warm embrace. "My child has suffered so much. Mom welcomes you home." Life back at the group home was incredibly peaceful and fulfilling. I had 3 wonderful children who followed me around everywhere. In the blink of an eye, 3 whole years passed. Recently, the global price of gold skyrocketed to historic highs. Seizing the perfect opportunity, I liquidated every single ounce of gold I had hoarded, instantly elevating my net worth into the 8-figure range. Living in the quiet, low-cost town where I grew up, simply living off the interest of my fortune, was more than enough to cover all my daily expenses. Even though my salary working at the group home was meager, room and board were fully covered. Aside from occasionally buying some toys and supplies for the kids, I barely spent a dime. Living here felt like being entirely isolated from the rest of the world, completely free from the crushing pressures of modern society. That is, until one random afternoon, when I saw Jess's name suddenly flash on my caller ID. I froze for a split second. The moment I answered the call, it felt as though my memories were violently dragged 3 years into the past. "Evelyn, did you hide Liam away somewhere?" She shrieked hysterically through the speaker. "You didn't want him to come find me, so you took him away, didn't you?" Listening to her frantic, unhinged interrogation, a cold, serene smile spread across my face. "Liam's final resting place is located out at Pine Hill Cemetery. I didn't have much money at the time, so the plot I picked is in a very remote, cheap section of the graveyard," I stated calmly. "But I firmly believe that given your incredibly deep brotherly bond, you'll definitely make the trek out there to sweep his memorial every single year, right?" A piercing, agonizing scream erupted from the other end of the line. She sounded like she had completely lost her mind. I calmly ended the call, pulled the SIM card out of my phone, snapped it in half, and dropped it into the trash can. It was finally over.
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.